everyone. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Thanks for being here with me as we read and navigate and try to dig out the meaning of this Go show. It's a rather long one, but it's important, as I often say, so I should stop saying that because it'll stop having meaning if I say it too often, I suppose. But we are talking about debts of gratitude. And it's not about simply being appreciative of others, but to be appreciative on a level that is aware, recognizes, and in fact realizes all of the components that go into our life process and the methodology in order to deeply perceive, understand, and manifest that understanding. So with that in mind, we'll continue reading Nichiren, and he begins again with, though this statement is the declaration of a single Buddha. Again, we're talking about the lifespan chapter. The thus come one Shakyamuni. This is very important because you've heard me say many times that the emanations, the other Buddhas, are not actual Buddhas. In fact, Buddhas that are teachers of Buddhism, as Shakyamuni is that Buddha, that historical Buddha. All of the other Buddhas are expedient means. They are storytelling embodiments of other enlightenments. And what are those other enlightenments, you may well ask? Those emanations are from Shakyamuni Buddha, but it's slide your understanding just slightly, and you'll understand that all of those emanations are you and I. They are our Buddha nature, resulting from our wanting to create, invoke, instantiate our Buddha-ness. And how are we doing that? Why are we doing that? How do we even have a method to enliven, to awaken that Buddha within us? Because of the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. Without Shakyamuni, we would have no method, no reason to look. And so all of those Sylvain Buddhas, Bob Buddhas, John Buddhas, Betty Buddhas, so on and so forth, those are emanations of our single-minded invocation of our Buddha nature, our Buddha. Does that make sense? So this statement, the declaration that there is a single Buddha, should almost be another word, a single manifest Buddha in human form. The thus come one Shakyamuni. All the bodhisattvas, from the stage of near enlightenment on down, including you and I, should honor it and have a resolute mind and conviction in it. In other words, this is the source of Buddhism, right? I mean, he's the founder. He's the one who taught it. It didn't come from anywhere else. We didn't find some magic scrolls in the ground. A lightning bolt didn't come from the sky and light something on fire and it spoke to us. No, this was a man who demonstrated by being a human being, he could, with concentration and insight, call forth his enlightenment, his awakening. And all he did from that point on was talk about what it looked like, what it felt like, how to get there, how as human beings we can enliven this in our lives to make our lives fulfilled and more resilient to the life process of suffering from attachments and so on and so forth. Because with this enlightenment, like a flashlight going off in our mind, we understand that this is part of the process, and we're no longer emotionally attached and vilified by things going on in our own minds. So it's almost like being of two minds, isn't it? An awake mind and a slavish mind to every little whim that goes on. So the label for that slavish mind is samsara. And the label for that clear mind of understanding that feels detached in that it doesn't respond to every little whim is our Buddha mind. It's really, you can break it down this way, it's very, very simple. But our human minds, our monkey minds, man, they're distracting, right? So, for the Buddha, he continues, many treasures, an emanation, came down from the east and testified to the truth of these words, and the emanation Buddhas assembled from the 10 directions and extended their long, broad tongues up to the Brahma heaven, just as Shakyamuni Buddha did. In other words, they attained the same, through the same method. There is only one enlightenment. We all can participate and enlighten it for ourselves, in ourselves, but enlightenment is enlightenment. There aren't 8 billion types of enlightenment. Enlightenment is enlightenment. We all have different pairs of glasses on, obfuscating or opening to perceive that enlightenment. That's our path, right? And to understand that that's our path is our Buddha wisdom. Afterward, they all returned to their respective lands. Samsara. The words, quote, have preached, now preach, and will preach, end quote, include not only the sutras preached by Shakyamuni in his 50 years of teaching, but all the sutras preached by the Buddhas of the 10 directions and the 3 existences without setting aside a single character or even a single brushstroke. This is the scholarship of Buddhism. This includes Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, Tendai, Dengyo, Miaolo, so on. It is in comparison to all of these that the Lotus Sutra is proclaimed to be superior, the ultimate. The superior is an odd word because it kind of condescends, doesn't it? It shouldn't be superior so much. That's just a positioning in the lineage of the teachings. In other words, you have a beginner classes in any kind of endeavor you take, and you reach an intermediate stage, and then at some point you become a master, right? I mean, we've developed this kind of hierarchical understanding of knowledge in everything. So in so far as the teachings are concerned, Shakyamuni's initial goal wasn't achievable the minute he achieved enlightenment. He tried to teach what that was like. That was the Avatamsaka Sutra, right? The golden, now I forget the other translation. Anyway, the flower garland, okay? He stopped teaching that just a couple of weeks into it, because nobody was ready to even understand what he was describing. And if you read the Avatamsaka, wow, it's like a sentence is 5 pages long. Everything he describes has to have so many words around it to even try to touch upon what he's describing that you just get lost in all the words. So it must have been exciting as hell, right? As hell. It must have been very exciting. But to his dismay, his intense wish to bring everyone into this. Look what I found. Look how amazing it is. Look, you don't get it. What am I doing? I'm not. Okay, I need to take a breath, step back. How do I get you to come to this understanding? Well, let's start with the simple stuff. And this is how he builds his sermons. And he builds them one upon the other. Okay, now do you get this? And he taught for years some of these sutras until he had enough students who were getting it. They said, okay, let's move on. Next step, we got to get there. Some he preached for a couple of years, some 8 years before he moved on to the next. It's difficult. It's difficult to learn new things, to really learn them to the point where they're cellularly part of your understanding of the world and your worldview, right? It's one thing to read texts. It's another to take them in deeply and function on the basis of the knowledge you gain from them. So it took longer for some stages of teaching. And if you endeavor, and I encourage you to, read many sutras and read Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu and Tendai and the perfection of wisdom and the Lankavatara and the Virmalakirti and so on and so forth, and jump around in the early Mahayana, middle Mahayana, and even some Hinayana, you'll see for yourself that it seems to be just a constant repetition of the same things. Because to us, with our capacity, we can see through the rhetoric and see the meaning and the point in what is being said. So for a modern person like you and I, reading through those seem to be saying a lot of the same thing in a different way. But for the people of the time, there were distinctly different levels and stages. So latter scholars, latter bodhisattva, were able to subdivide zones of teachings, 5 periods of teachings. Even though there are many more teachings than that, they fit within a general category. It's amazing. Tendai's work was amazing. But it was necessary in order to be able to look at thousands of writings, commentaries, and teachings and be able to see clearly, okay, that doesn't fit to any period. In fact, it kind of misses the point that's in all of these different periods. I don't think that teaching was actually a transcription of a sermon given by Shakyamuni. I think that's somebody's erroneous interpretation, so I'm going to take it out of the canon of Buddhist scholarship. That's some pretty amazing editing, and if you can prove it by this strong line of reasoning throughout the teachings, that's real scholarship, and it helps Buddhism, or anything that's done that way, to stay linear, to stay truthful to the origin and the meaning and the intent. And it's not until the Lotus Sutra where the intent is finally arrived at. The intent he had from the flower garland on was the same, but he had to raise the capacity of people's understanding and willingness to experience what he was trying to show. And in the Lotus Sutra, he says, now that you've developed all this capacity, now do this, and you'll get it. You'll have it. That's something he didn't have in the earlier teachings because he was just there. He just expected people to get it. But that wasn't his goal. His goal was that everyone experience it. It wasn't until he started to teach it that he understood people had to get there for themselves. They couldn't just be told to look. It wasn't that easy. The human mind, the samsaric conditioning that we're in with our tendencies is so strong that it completely obfuscates. Even if we look right at it, We don't see it. And so it took a lot of years of teaching to develop people's capacity to the point where they could see it, experience it. The it being enlightenment, Buddha-ness. Okay, so here we are. But all the sutras preached by the Buddhas are 10 directions, 3 existences, without setting aside a single character or a single brushstroke. It is in comparison to all of these that the Lotus Sutra is proclaimed to be superior, as I said earlier, superior in that it finally reaches the objective. At that time, the Buddhas of the 10 directions indicated their agreement beyond all doubt. In other words, all manifestation, Buddha enlightenment is enlightenment, right? If after they had returned to their respective lands, they had told their disciples that there was in fact a sutra that was superior to the Lotus Sutra, do you suppose their disciples would ever have believed them? It's an interesting turn of phrase. If there are those who, though they have not seen it with their own eyes, nevertheless suspect that there may be a sutra superior to the Lotus Sutra, if the Lotus Sutra is giving you the ultimate method for you to experience your enlightenment, your awakening in this form, in this very moment, it's hard to imagine, isn't it, that there would be something more direct? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I just opened my Buddha mind. I need to spend some time in that Buddha mind, looking around to see what it is I need to see. Right? When you open a door to a house, you don't see the entire contents of the house, do you? You kind of have to walk in, make yourself familiar, look around. Think about it like this. So is there possibly some sutra, some teaching that looks around for you? I don't know. What would be superior to just getting in the house? It's hard to imagine, but I suppose because of our human nature and our attachment and idea and loving to discern things discreetly one from another, that we can just invent a fairy sutra. It's just, human beings. It's not beyond our capacity to do. Look at all the world religions. We've created some weird magical stuff. If for no other reason than to be weird and magical, like that's an accomplishment. It's very like a dog chasing its tail, isn't it? We never escape anything. We're constantly chasing after something, which ultimately doesn't get us anywhere, does it? So, yeah, that's human nature. It certainly could happen. Nevertheless, suspect that there may be a sutra superior to the Lotus Sutra somewhere in India, or in the palaces of the Dragon Kings, the Four Heavenly Kings, or the deities of the Sun and Moon. I would say this. Were not Brahma, Shakra, and the deities of the Sun and Moon, the Four Heavenly Kings, the Dragon Kings, present when Shakyamuni preached the Lotus Sutra? They're all included, right? In the expedient means, Shakyamuni was very expert at talking to the people from what they know, which includes all these cultural stories and these deifications and these fables that he's grown up with and they've grown up with. So he used the parlance of the day in order to lead them to understand something more profound. This is why expedient means throughout the sutras and commentaries are used to mine meaning, to dig out the essential ideas. Those are the focus of learning. That is how we perceive differently, grow our capacity, right? Not that those elements of dragons and and so forth are actual things we experience. They are emanations of the mind, just like the other Buddhas are emanations of Shakyamuni's mind, etc. If the sun and moon and the other deities should say, quote, there is a sutra superior to the Lotus Sutra, have you read that anywhere? You merely do not know about it, then they would be a sun and moon who speak great falsehoods. He says that, again, using the stories themselves to indicate that they gave their complete devotion. Man, I'm having trouble with words this morning. I apologize. But they gave their loyalties to Shakyamuni in all of the sutras and teachings. So why would they then, in some errant dialogue or somebody's mind, contradict that utterly? Why would they do that if they were not misled themselves, right? So, in that case, I would berate them, saying, sun and moon, you dwell up in the sky rather than on the ground as we do, and yet you never fall down. This is because of the power you gain by observing most strictly the precept of never telling a lie. But now, if you tell this great lie by saying there is a sutra superior to the Lotus Sutra, I am certain that even before the kalpa of decline arrives, you will come plummeting down to earth. What is more, you will not stop falling until you've reached the depths of the great citadel of the hell of incessant suffering. That is surrounded by solid iron. It's interesting because we know that the earth has an iron core, don't we? That blows me away. Beings who tell such great lies should not be allowed to remain a moment longer in the sky, circling above the 4 continents of the earth. That is how I would berate them. So that's a clever way of saying to somebody who makes that claim that they're lying to themselves. That's nowhere within the teachings. Yet such men of great wisdom, such great teachers and Tripitaka masters as Cheng Quan of the Flower Garland School, or Shanwu Wei, Qingkang Chi, Bu Kun, Kobo, Jikaku, and Chisho of the True Word School, proclaim that the Flower Garland and Mahavajracana Sutras are superior to the Lotus Sutra. This is a familiar thing we hear from Nichiren, again reminding people of his day that the predominant teachers of Buddhism are influential in this samurai authoritarian government, are following and preaching erroneous teachings. Though it is not for me to judge in such matters, interesting, I would say that in the light of the higher principles of Buddhism, such men would appear to be arch enemies of the Buddhas, would they not? Because their work is counter to the periods of Shakyamuni's teachings, his ultimate teaching, even the Nirvana Sutra, which came later on his deathbed, after preaching for 8 years the Lotus Sutra, was a total validation of the Lotus Sutra. Beside them, evil men such as Devadatta, Kokalika are as nothing. So these are the arch-enemies within the writings of, we know, the folklore of Devadatta and his incorrigible disbelief and his actual wanting to destroy Shakyamuni Buddha and take over from him. Ultimately, through the Lotus Sutra, through Myoho Renge-kyo, opened his door, his awareness, his awakening to Buddhahood, only through Myoho Renge-kyo. It's a very powerful story. In fact, they are in a class with Mahadeva and the great arrogant Brahman, and those who put a resolute mind and conviction in the teachings of such men, they too are a fearful lot indeed. Now he goes into his question-answer style of teaching. Question: do you really proclaim that Cheng Quan of the Flower Garland School, Chia Shang of the Three Treatises School, Zun En of the Drama Characteristics School, and Shan Wu Wei and the others of the True Word School, on down to Kobo, Jikaku, and Chisho, are the enemies of the Buddha? Answer: this is a very important question, a matter of gravest concern to the Buddha's teachings. Yet, on examining the text of the sutra, I find that if someone should declare that there is a sutra superior to the Lotus Sutra, then regardless of who that person may be, he or she cannot escape the charge of slandering the law. Therefore, if we go by what the sutra says, then persons such as this must be regarded as enemies of the Buddha. Enemies of Shakyamuni? That's not what he said. He said enemies of the Buddha. In other words, foremost obstacles to the attainment, everyone's attainment, of Buddha, of the life state of clarity, of Buddha-ness, of your awakening, of enlightenment. They stand strongly in the way because they take you on your path and they say, go this way. While right straight in front of you is your Buddha nature, your Buddha-ness, your enlightenment. And they put up a roadblock and say, detour. This is how they are enemies, again, storytelling, of what? Of Buddha, Buddha-ness, the experience of enlightenment, not Shakyamuni. Yes, they're running counter to Shakyamuni, but that's not what he's saying. And if out of fear I fail to point out this fact, then the distinctions of relative merit made among the various sutras will all have been made in vain. In other words, all of this learning and study that I've done, it'll be meaningless because I'll be pointed away from the very goal. If, out of awe of these great teachers of the past, I should simply point at their latter-day followers and call them enemies of the Buddha, then these latter-day followers of the various schools would say, quote, the assertion that Mahavajrayana Sutra is superior to the Lotus Sutra is not something that we ourselves invented on our own. It is the doctrine taught by the patriarchs of our school. Oh, that makes it okay then. Though we may be no match for them in observing the precepts, in wisdom and understanding, or in status, when it comes to the doctrines that they taught, we never diverge from them in the slightest, right? We're just dutiful followers. Again, I reiterate, Shakyamuni himself said, study all of Buddhism. Don't let yourself get pigeonholed, because you are the only one responsible for finding your path to your awakening. That's one of the conditions of samsara, right? We're not all connected at the hip, to borrow from a popular expression. It may seem like we are, but we all go our own path. And in that case, Shakyamuni continues, one would have to admit that they are guilty of no fault. They're just following their leader, right? Nevertheless, if I know that this assertion is false, and yet out of fear of others I fail to say so, then I will be ignoring the stern warning of the Buddha, who said, quote, it is like a royal envoy who would rather, even though it costs him his life, in the end conceal none of the words of his ruler. What am I to do, Nichiren says. If I speak up, I face fearful opposition from the world at large. But if I am silent, I can hardly escape the condemnation of failing to heed the Buddha's stern warning. Forward or backward, my way is blocked. Yet perhaps it is only to be expected, for as the Lotus Sutra says, quote, since hatred and jealousy toward this sutra abound even when the Duskam One is in the world, how much more will it be so after his passing? End quote. Again, elsewhere, quote, it will face much hostility in the world and be difficult to believe, difficult to practice. When Shakyamuni Buddha had been conceived by his mother, Lady Maya, the devil king of the sixth heaven gazed down into Lady Maya's womb and said, quote, my arch enemy, the sharp sword of the Lotus Sutra, has been conceived. Before the birth can take place, I must do something to destroy it. Then the devil king transformed himself into a learned physician, entered the palace of the king Suddhodana, Shakyamuni's father, and said, quote, I am a learned physician, and I have brought some excellent medicine that will ensure the safe delivery of the child. In this way, he attempted to poison Lady Maya. And you can read those stories. Many books have been written, and I'm sure there's plenty online, different versions of it. And some very fanciful versions. Something about being born on an elephant or something. Anyway, there's a lot of mysticism out there. When the Buddha was born, the devil king caused stones to rain down on him and mixed poison in his milk. Later, when the Buddha left the palace to enter the religious life, the devil king changed himself into a black venomous serpent. There's all these stories, you read them in every kind of religion, right? But it's all folklore. Tried to block his way. In addition, he entered the bodies of such evil men as Devadatta. So there's that wisp of evil again. This knowingly and antagonizing force that doesn't want people to succeed enters Devadatta, Kokalika, King Virudaka, and King Ajatashatru, inciting them to hurl a great stone at the Buddha that injured him and drew blood, or to kill many of the Shakyas, people at different stages, monks at different stages of learning, the Buddha's clansmen, or murder his disciples. Flip Wilson, showing my age again, on a show called Laugh-In, used to have this little shtick he would do. He'd wear a judge's robe, and he'd come out and say, like, people would question his actions and say, the devil made me do it. And we all knew, this is funny because of the impersonation of some mythical bad, evil force. He was comically representing as, that's my excuse for behaving poorly. So, this is just human nature. And they're certainly a part of many, many stories in Buddhism. These great persecutions were planned long ago, schemes that were designed to prevent the Buddha, the world-honored one, from preaching the Lotus Sutra. It is persecutions such as these that the sutra means when it says hatred and jealousy toward the sutra abound, even when the thus come one is in the world. Certainly, when somebody points the finger at truth, there are always a bunch of people accustomed to just falling through life, going through the same motions, casting their responsibilities onto a teacher, an example, a tradition, a mythology. It's not me that's doing wrong, it's coming from somewhere else. Buddhism just strikes that to the ground. You are responsible for your enlightenment, period. But if I tell you you're responsible for your enlightenment, your first reaction, being ignorant of teachings, not a practitioner, would look upon me as, oh, you think you're better than me. Oh, you think you know. And your resistance and your magnetic field will come out, and you will push back, even without thinking about it, because your first order of business as a human being is self-preservation. Right or wrong, you need to come to things on your own. Aha! This is what we've been talking about all along. This is what Shakyamuni's enlightenment was about. And when he first started teaching, he said, I can't just give these people enlightenment. They actually have to work for it. We actually have to have a curiosity, a will, a volition, enough of an energetic disposition to focus and practice in order to awaken ourselves. This is why I'm always telling you, you can't go to an organization and they prop themselves up as we're the ones who are going to give you this or that, and you're going to get this from us. And by the way, there's a fee, you know, and then collect all of this stuff and then say, well, you have to, let's see, this is as old as sales, by the way. It's called something I learned when I was in radio. It's called the negative sales pitch. Well, we can give you this for a payment, but really you have to prove your worth. They don't say it that way, of course. They say, well, if you pass this or that, or if you do these things, you run a sort of a gauntlet, whether it's financial or tests or, I don't know, play recordings, whatever it is. They give you a set of things that you have to accomplish, and then they will deem that, well, we'll give you the tool now so you can become enlightened. How not Buddhist is that? Shakyamuni's whole purpose in being a human being was to let us know, Myoho Rengekyo, your enlightenment's already there. You just need to work on cleaning the mud off your lenses and see it. Demand to experience it. Namu Myoho Rengekyo. How can anyone put themselves in a position to say, yeah, you can do that, but, you know, I'm the authority, so you're going to have to come to me. No, I don't. It's my Buddhahood. Get out of my way. Priest, head priest, honcho, leader, president, whatever the heck you want to call yourself, you are absolutely insignificant in my attainment of my Buddha nature, other than being an obstacle. If that's how you want to signify yourself, then, oh well. Right? I mean, isn't that obvious with everything we read about Buddhism? Unless, of course, you don't read the Lotus Sutra. Oops. The Lotus Sutra, oh, it's inferior. It's just for special people. It's not for you. Here, read this. This is the situation he's talking about, right? In addition to these troubles arising long before the Buddha preached the Lotus Sutra, there were others that occurred later when he expounded the sutra itself. These were the doubts that arose when Shakyamuni revealed that for 40-some years, Shariputra, Madhavalyana, and great bodhisattvas had in fact been among the archenemies of the Lotus Sutra. There was a reckoning. Reread the Lotus Sutra and you'll see that there's a reckoning in there. There's a lot of civil discord in this ceremony in the sky. A bunch of bodhisattvas got up and went, screw this, and they left. And after they left, Shakyamuni was like, cool, I didn't need them here. You could read the Lotus Sutra like a very scholarly soap opera, because it's storytelling of mental processes, of social behaviors in samsara, the way humans operate. That's what Buddhism is all about. But the sutra says, quote, how much more will all this be so after his passing? By this we know that in a future age, after the passing of the Buddha, there are bound to be persecutions and difficulties even greater and more fearful than those that occurred during his lifetime. If even the Buddha had difficulty bearing up under such pressures, how can ordinary people be expected to bear them? Particularly when these troubles are destined to be even greater than those that occurred during the Buddha's lifetime. So that's a sobering thought, right? Though one might wonder, what great persecutions could possibly be more terrible than the huge rock 30 feet long and 16 feet wide that Devadatta rolled down on a Buddha or the drunken elephant that King Ajatasattu sent charging after him. If persecutions greater than those that arose during the Buddha's lifetime keep occurring again and again to someone, who is not guilty of the slightest fault? Then one would realize that that person is a true votary of the Lotus Sutra in an age after the Buddha's passing. So now he's showing his students, I know you guys get scared when you see me being arrested or taken away to be beheaded or sent out of the country by a group of samurai and walked on out of here. It makes you have doubts. Makes you wonder, wow, we were following that guy and he got arrested. But oh wait, let me point out that this is written about in the sutras. This is going to happen. Somebody who upholds your right to your path to Buddhahood in this lifetime is speaking counter to the powers that be, who don't want you to feel that you're that empowered. They want to control your lives. They are obstacles to your empowerment, your enlightenment. And I'm pointing it out. Remember the emperor's new clothes? He's naked. A lot of people are not going to like to hear that, and those who are following me are going to feel nervous that maybe they're not doing the right thing. But I'm telling you, you should redouble your efforts toward what I'm showing you in the Lotus Sutra, because this is proof that I'm a votary of the Lotus, that the Lotus Sutra is the ultimate, is your enlightenment. You don't have any other obstacles. The reason I'm being persecuted is because I'm truth to power in modern parlance. Right? The successors of the Buddha were among the four ranks of bodhisattvas. They were messengers of the Buddha, yet Bodhisattva Aryaveda was killed by a non-Buddhist. The venerable Aryashima had his head cut off by the king Dhamira, and Buddhamitra had to stand for 12 years under a red flag before he could attract the notice of the ruler. And Bodhisattvas Nargarjuna had to stand 7 years under a similar flag. Bodhisattva Ashvaghosha was sold to an enemy country for the sum of 300,000 coins, and the scholar Manoharatha died of chagrin. These are examples of troubles that took place in the 10,000 years of the former day of the law. 10,000? Oh, the 1,000 years of the former day of the law. Where are we time-wise? Yeah, we need to wrap it up here. We come now to a time 500 years after the beginning of the middle day of the law, or 1,500 years after the passing of the Buddha. I think that's a good place to start the next video. So I hope you're following along with Nichiren's examples of teachings and how they justify themselves, how the order and the gist and the meaning of them follows a direct line to our own establishment of our own Buddha nature. That anything that dissuades us or veers us from having total confidence in that is an enemy of us reaching Buddha-ness. It's a diversion, it's a distraction, it's counterproductive, it's really to diminish or to take away your ability to instantiate with conviction, with resolve, there's that word again, that our Buddha-ness exists and that we can commune with it every day, every moment. Anything that distracts us from that is tantamount to killing us. It is, if you want to use the word, evil. So, buttress your convictions by chanting every day, even in your mind when you're driving, or, well, don't be distracted, but I chant all throughout the day for whatever reason. Whenever I feel like I need clarity about something, which is often, it's just that's what it is to be human, confused, really, just pushing forward or falling forward, whatever the case may be. This is what I mean when I say stay strong in your practice. In other words, use it. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Have a tremendous rest of your day. Prove to yourself how valuable this practice is. Just resolve to make it so. Right? All right. I'll see you in the next one. And don't forget the podcasts. All of these videos are downloadable as a podcast, the Buddhahood podcast. Thank you. See you soon.